You're now listening to the show about the shit in life that's just a bit too much, from the perspective of stand-up comics, with hosts Carmelo Bongiovi and Ken Krantz. This week's topic is Hell Gigs and Cult Movies, Part 2, with our guest Brian O'Halloran. This is A Bit Too Much.
I'll never forget. I was at an open mic, and an improv group went up, and this was years. This was like when I first started, and the improv group, this dude is shouting out, "All right, give us a location, to set this in." And like clearly nobody there. It was mostly comics in the crowd. Nobody wants to watch improv.
Yeah.
And someone shouts out, "Your own asshole." And the guy on stage was like, anything more specific?
That's pretty specific.
The same dude shouted out, "You want me to be more specific than your own asshole?"
Was it a comic? Who said that?
I have no idea.
It feels like something a comic would say.
I don't remember what happened after that. Like, I don't know if they then did a, skit from this guy's own asshole.
Probably, right? Because improv is yes and. So probably we're in.
But you guys are also though discussing watching like Little League baseball and comparing it to major leagues. Like if you go to like Upright Citizens Brigade or you go out to LA to a lot of the bigger improv groups, you're going to see some really amazing people do amazing improv. Yes, it's a journey. You don't know what you're getting, and a lot of the times the audience just aren't with what the comics are trying to do up there. But otherwise, like Second City and all that, it's pretty funny shit.
Yeah, no, of course it could be done at a higher level. And those are like people who are like at the caliber that like will go on to things like SNL. Right. But you know what, even SNL, it's like we're watching it. It feels that way, but it's, it's polished by the time you see it. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. It's just, maybe I'm just scarred by bad amateur improv shows. Cause I did, like I said, I headlined for one once, and it was like halfway through, I was like, I don't want to be. It ended up being fine. I think that the show went so poorly that they were like relieved to have like a real, like, okay, this guy is not pretending to be a banana. This is good. Okay, good. But like, I think they were a little relieved by the like levity that a stand-up would bring. But I remember being halfway through their part, I was like, oh, I don't want to follow this at all. It actually is a great thing to follow because it's so bad. You can only really go up from there unless they kill the audience. Talking about hell gigs, right? Like sometimes what goes on before you is bad, and then you come on and you can look like a rock star.
Yep.
But sometimes what happens before you is so bad that you can't recover from what they've done to the audience. Yeah. You literally, like, the audience looks like victims. Like they look like they all should have like fireman's blankets around them because they've all been hurt. They've all been hurt.
Well, they also have this attitude. Well, now prove us wrong. Like, all right, that guy was a jerk.
Yeah, I'm at a bad show. Prove you wrong. Yeah.
And if you're with him, you're probably just as bad.
You see them sitting like with their arms folded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is a challenge now. Like,
yeah.
I recently had a show, very old crowd, very blue collar old crowd, and I was hosting, and I hate hosting, but I just do. I don't know. I always find myself hosting, and I'm like hosting the show, and it's like really, I'm like, and this one woman in front again. I'm like focusing on the one person that looks angry, right?
Yeah.
And I can't get off of her. But what I realized later on is that she actually couldn't hear like her hearing aid. She kept on adjusting her hearing aid. Like I saw her later, like it wasn't working or a battery. I don't know how hearing aids work. I don't know. Is there little batteries in them? I'm assuming. Like I have no idea how they work. But it looked like she could. And I was like, oh, see, I just need to let things go. She couldn't hear me.
Like, do you know that famous Twisted Sister story? Dee Snider?
No.
They're at a concert. There's a Twisted Sister concert back in the day. And everybody in the theater or arena, I don't know where it was, but everybody's up on their feet except for this one section. And Dee Snider, all he can see is one section of people not up and dancing. And he's yelling Like, what the fuck?
Oh, no.
Get up. Yeah, but it was like the handicap section. Like, that's where they threw all the people in wheelchairs and shit.
That happened to me. I was at a Comic-Con, and they do these things, panels. So they'll bring guests into a big ballroom at the convention center, and you'll do a panel with, William Shatner or the people from Star Trek or whatever. So it was a Clerks panel, me, Jeff, and Trevor, who plays Elias from Clerks 2 and 3. We're at this place, I think it was Calgary or something like that. And there's a whole row in the front, for the handicapped and people who, they even had a hearing impaired translator on the stage with us. And it got to the point of the panel where it's Q&A. People come up and ask.
Yeah.
They had a microphone on the 2 aisles over here where people could walk up. And then it had a guy running around. And the lights are really like on you on that stage. And so the guy runs back and like, we have a question from back here and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, so I'm like, oh, stand up. Let's see you. Come on, stand up. Because I would say, everybody just say your name. We go, hi, Bob. Good to see you. What's your question? And all I heard from the audience over that section was, ooh. And I was like, what? And so the guy running around the mic went like, she's in a wheelchair. And so I was like, look, I'm already in this hole. I'm going to dig it even deeper. I'm like, well, what the fuck are you sitting back there for? We have this whole row up front. There's like 7 empty seats. You couldn't roll yourself over to this bullshit? What the fuck?
Right.
You got to make me, I got to look bad because she wants to sit in the normie section.
I can only see your head from here. Yeah.
And I was like, and you guys already take the best parking spots. So I was just like, and then I start doing the motion. I just start going, I'm digging this to China. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to milk this leg. And so it's a running joke with me and Jeff. I'm like, oh, you're going to attack the handicap today?
See, but those moments, if you can do it in a way that is clearly in jest, then it's appreciated usually,
Funny postscript to that story. So the next day, it's a multiple day convention. She comes over and it turns out she has MS, which is sometimes you walk and sometimes you can't. You get fatigue and whatnot. So she came over and she was standing up. I'm like, you fraud. I knew it. So we took a photo with them where her wheelchair was there. She's standing and me and Jeff are like, you're fraud. It was a fun thing. So shout out to those struggling with MS. I get it.
Full circle.
It's funny, like you hear people say things like, oh, that movie could never be made today.
True.
And Brian was at like one of these cons recently, not far from, it was that punk rock flea market thing where it was like, come meet the cast of Clerks.
Okay.
And it was right by my house. I took my wife and my stepkids and we went to go say hi to Brian. Mm-hmm. We were hanging out and, my stepkids are 18 and 13. So not too many 90s films under their belts. Sure. And, but Brian was so nice to them. Like he was so engaging with them. And then on the way home, they were like, oh, who is he? He was in a movie. So I was telling them about Clerks and I watched it with my oldest stepdaughter the next day. And she was just like, within 2 minutes was like, oh, like, I can't believe, like, she had not seen anything that raw or that filthy. Right. And it's so weird how I get the film's 30 years old, but for some reason I still think of it as like a newer movie. Like the 90s don't seem that long ago to me still.
Right. Yeah.
But watching it with a fresh pair of eyes for the first, and then seeing it through, like a Gen Z's eyes,
yeah, sure.
I was like, holy shit, I really don't think they could pull this off today.
Yeah, you go on TikTok sometimes and watch reaction videos of people watching things like that, or like watching or like listening to rap music from the 90s, or watching a movie. I mean, you don't really think, like in our generation, I don't think people are that easily offended sometimes, or like taken back, or like, oh my God, I can't believe they went there, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny because that element of Clerks, to me, is why it's so significant and why everyone loved it when it came out, because it was like, this is like how I talk with my friend when I visit them at work. And, when I'm with my friend, like if my friend works at a store and I go visit them and we just sit there and bullshit, we're saying horrible things, or we're saying funny things to each other, or, one person's pontificating about how they see something. Like that is what makes Clerks so relatable, because it's the setting is small in scale, in terms of where the movie goes, right? But the dialogue is everything in that movie, and the relationship.
Yeah, and you could see over the 30 years how Kevin, in his own filmmaking, has adjusted to certain has evolved into certain sensibilities of comedy and stuff like that.
Sure.
Like his most recent film that's coming out this week, called 4:30 Movie, is about him and his friends in the 80s, 1986 to be specific, and them going to the movie theaters and sneaking into theaters and things that were talked about back then. He wrote it in a very sweet way where the original fans of the dick and fart jokes and the snowballing and the donkey show, you're not going to get that. Plus, to be honest with you, companies to find funding and distribution for that has started to be reined in a little, because now some of the executives and legal department, for that matter, are all like, oh, we don't want to have a big controversy. We don't want to have a big, people be offended.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even starting with casting. A lot more actors are like, listen, I'm not going to play a transgendered person. Why don't you get a transgendered person to play this role? Or why don't you get someone who has lived this experience be that role? And it's getting to this where the entertainment industry is getting that way. And you guys see it even in stand-up comedy, where the jokes that would have been said 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s really aren't flying across the mic anymore in a certain way, or they're not being said in a mainstream club. They're maybe being said in smaller clubs, certain kind of audiences, that type of thing, where are you going to get booked or not? Because do you appeal to a wider audience rather than a specific audience?
Yeah. But I think when it comes down to it, if you could tell that story genuinely in a sweet way, and it's still, comedy doesn't have to be one thing or the other, right? It could be comedy could be clean, and comedy could be dirty, but it has to be genuine to the storyteller, right? Like, what doesn't work is when you take somebody who wanted to write the original Clerks script and then got edited down. Like, that's where it doesn't work. That's where the jokes become destroyed, right? Because you try to turn a joke about, whatever, ass to mouth into something that has nothing to do with, or is not as graphic, then it's just not as funny. But if you're just telling a genuinely sweet story, it could still be funny.
Right. It's like that classic skit on Mad TV, or rather in Living Color, where they did The Sopranos on A&E, where literally it was edited to shit because they would say the F-bomb.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. Like, you're taking the entire essence out of it. But like you said, you're right. It all depends on who's telling the story. A lesbian can tell lesbian jokes. A black guy can tell black jokes and even use the N-word numerous times. And that's them. That's their culture. That's what it is.
Right.
It's the same thing with Italians jokes, Irish guys talking about Irish people, things, Asians talking about Asian jokes. It all depends on the mouthpiece that it's all coming out of.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just hit on something, though, because while we were talking, and I was talking about how that film couldn't get made today. And then I was thinking, I'm always seeing these lists, 90s films or 80s films that are problematic now, that haven't held up, that are cringy. And I never see Clerks on that list. I'm always seeing other movies, and I never hear about how it would be problematic now. And I'm thinking now, because there is such a sweetness to that movie that it's
we also have the protection of the U.S. government, since it was part of the Library of Congress now.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's right. We're in the collection of their movies. They bring in 10 movies a year, and we were one of them.
When you heard that, what went through your mind?
It just confirmed this country's in a downward spiral.
This can't be what the Library of Congress is.
It was cool. It's to know that, listen, if the nukes should fly and everybody gets hunkered into that bunker somewhere in the Colorado mountains or whatever, this is one of their choices of entertainment. Honey, what do you think? 1994? Dick and fart jokes?
Citizen Kane or Clerks?
Right.
Right. It's like that Twilight Zone episode.
Crazy.
that Twilight Zone episode where the guy all he wants to do is be left alone with his books? Did you ever see that episode?
Yeah, yeah.
And then his glasses fall and break, and he can't read his books. That's going to be someone with just Clerks in their hand.
I'm proud. I'm proud of the fact that, listen, I did something that even the government approved of, finally.
Like when you were making it,
Finally,
when you're shooting that around when you're in New Brunswick writing that, like, do you, like, is it even a thought in your head, like, hey, 30 years later, this is still going to be a big deal? We're going to get 2 sequels out of it.
Literally, Kevin was writing Clerks in the video store, the RST video store next to the Quick Stop. So he wrote that script while being the, counter jockey at the video store. That's when he wrote it. And I was living in New Brunswick at the time with a bunch of roommates who were all going to Rutgers University. And when I went down to audition down at First Avenue Playhouse in Atlantic Highlands, and got the role and came back and was reading it to friends, like, oh my God, you'll never believe this script. It was during the 1993 NBA playoffs. The Knicks were in the playoffs, and they're all in the living room watching the playoffs. I'm like, dude, you guys, you got to listen to this fucking joke. It's hilarious. And they're like, shut up, man. Ewing's at the free throw line. I'm like, he's going to miss. It's not going to make a difference. No, listen to this joke.
He had to have missed. I wasn't there, but I'm sure he missed.
To think that
you didn't have the foresight to know what Clerks would do one day, but you had the foresight to know that the Knicks were never going to win the championship.
So to see that I was holding something in my hand that was eventually going to be in the Library of Congress.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy. That's crazy, especially with a film like that was smaller in scale. Like, this was not a big Hollywood magic movie, right? This was like a very grounded movie that the dialogue's it's everything in the movie, because most
literally
it
could have been a stage play. There's literally like three sets, 3 locations. We're at the store, we're on the roof, we're in the video store, and we're at a a funeral for, running out of a funeral for that matter. And so it's that kind of thing where it's like, was it whatever? I was like, it is what it is now.
That dialogue is written like almost like stand up. You know what I mean? Like that script is written like the things you guys cover is like any one of those things could be bits.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember seeing it it was word of mouth, and I ran out to rent it. Like, I think my brother had told me, you got to watch this.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like somebody captured the way me and my friends talk to each other. And I've never seen it.
I've
never seen it like played back to me before.
It's also at a time, it's a great point. It's also so I'm a younger sibling. I have an older brother. It's also at a time where, like, for me, everything new, music, movies, that's how I found things out. Either through a friend or my brother going like, this is great.
Yeah.
Right. And for you,
got to watch this movie.
Right. I was just going to say, just sorry to interrupt, but for your younger viewers who don't know what we're talking about, there was a time, you see, when new movies would come out. You'd have to leave your mom's basement, go, not call an Uber, because we didn't have cell phones or the internet, but actually walk or be driven to a store that had a whole wall of these movies on these things called discs. Yeah. And you had to put them in, take them, rent them with your membership card, come home, put them in a machine, watch it, rewind it. Actually, let's go back even further. Tapes. Rewind the tape because you have to be kind and rewind, they would tell you, and then bring it back within 3 days. Otherwise, they charged you more money for it.
Right. But I mean, Blockbuster was, and video stores, like independent ones or Blockbuster, like, were such a part of my childhood. Yeah. And like that is how I discovered everything, because I wasn't going to the movies all the time when I was when I was small. I would go to movies for certain big movies that larger groups of people wanted to see because someone had to take me. But Blockbuster, I remember we had 2 video stores in our neighborhood. We had like an independent one that was like the neighborhood one where you could also get your porn. And then there was Blockbuster. And those 2 stores were like how I spent many years of my childhood, was going to those stores, loading up on snacks and popcorn and a movie.
I'm old enough to remember the huge controversy about when VHS home use video recorders were going to destroy the movie theater industry. where they were like, "Oh, people are going to be able to stay home. We're not going to be able to pay our rent.
Well,
no one's going to come see movies."
They got it right. They were just 30 years too soon.
Right.
You know?
And also, but it really doesn't make sense to think back then that it was going to, because it came out so much later. You know what I mean?
You'd wait months and months for a movie.
Yeah, you really want
usually a minimum of 9 months it took before it went to theater.
Like, what is it, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Barely. Some movies I've seen do both, where a limited release in theaters for 2 weeks. At the same time, you can rent it for $19.99 on your, on demand.
Yeah. They have the like, and I guess COVID did a lot of that too, right? Because they had the straight to and then the in theater that thing. But it was such a word of mouth thing with movies, and of course, you would see a trailer or a commercial, but like really, the way you learned, like if somebody saw Clerks and it was like, holy shit, that's me and my friends. This is not a movie I've seen before, right?
Yeah,
because it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a different thing. And then like a brother or a friend would come to you and go like, you've got to see this shit. And you know what? That hype made it even fucking sweeter. Like there was something about this, like, I just got this information from one person who I like value their opinion, right? One person told me, or a group of people told me, you've got to go see this. And you heard it from people you know. There was something even like sweeter about, like, it was like, okay, now I'm being brought into their group because now I can talk to them about the lines. They've been repeating these lines. Whereas like now it's like, all out there. You don't hear about movies from friends anymore. No. Like about it as they know about it, and it's everywhere.
It blows up on your phone within seconds of something going on. I mean, when I was younger, I remember when Porky's came out. It's a rated R movie with crazy kind of things going on that had never been seen in a movie at that time. We were like, holy crap. And, the VHS got passed around for that. Or there was the thing, Faces of Death, this compilation of all these really fucked up things around the world, people eating monkey brains and beheadings and all sorts of craziness. And it was like Faces of Death. And it was never aired or played anywhere. It was always sold in video stores. And that tape got passed around as well. Like, you got to see this Faces of Death.
You had to be like 18 to rent it even. Right. And then it turned out it was all like staged phony shit.
Right.
But I can't.
But that was the viral moment. Yeah. That's how shit, made it around.
Yeah.
And it never got beyond your high school.
Word of mouth. Yeah. It's totally by, the people that you heard it from. But but it also like made it like kind of like, if it was something like that, it almost get like kind of naughty or kind of like taboo. You're like, I'm going to go see this thing. Like, I heard about this.
I remember finally getting my hands on Faces of Death at like 16 or 17 and then having to shut it off after 20 minutes and admitting like, this was not the movie to take acid to. Like I should I should have stuck with the cartoon. This is bumming me out, and that's all I ever saw. I saw the first 20 minutes of one of the Faces of Death, and I never went back.
Ironically, Faces of Death is also what you could call when you look out to an audience at a VFW.
Can I tell you, Brian, you said the funniest thing to me when I was texting. And by the way, I know I should acknowledge this, but it's the end of the episode. Like I asked Brian to come on and talk about cult films, and then we never even talked about cult films.
We don't have,
because I was talking to Carmelo. I was like, this dude's done 18 million podcasts about cult films. So
but he's never done one with me.
But so Brian is he's I don't know if you're in town now or you're going to be in town later, but
I'm driving in later tonight to tomorrow. Yeah.
So when I'm texting him asking if he wants to do the show, he's like, I'm actually going to be in Jersey doing a weed expo.
Right.
And I'm like.
So here, I'll read you it because it's just the exchange is hilarious. He goes, on the 12th, can you do it in person? I said, I might be able to. I know more as I get closer. Mm-hmm. So let's make it a Zoom, but I may come down to the shared universe if I'm down early. He goes, awesome. Man, do you even smoke weed? Why are you at a 420 expo on 9/13? So I wrote, I'm weed adjacent, thus fans will come by. I smoke like once or twice a year. He goes, I've been high every day since I'm 13. And I can't get on one of these expos. And I said to him, I mean, you're not a veteran of a foreign war, but I've seen you at plenty of VFW.
Right. Yeah, what makes you think?
Oh, that fucking made me laugh so hard.
That's very funny. That's very funny. Where is the Weed Expo? Do you want to plug it?
Sure. Sure. The Weed Expo is in Raritan, New Jersey at the New Jersey Exposition and Convention Center. You can go to 420expo.com for more information and tickets. Vince Pastore will be there, Big Pussy from The Sopranos. We talked about that earlier.
Interviewed him.
Yeah, there's going to be bands. There's going to be food trucks. There's an open air lounge where there's bands where you can smoke. There'll be vendors there selling all sorts of stuff from the dip to all that paraphernalia.
What's the date? Sorry, did you say the date?
The date is this Friday to Sunday.
This is useless. This is not coming out today or tomorrow.
Oh, well, then this would have been, if you would have been there. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
I could take this clip, though, and just put the clip out to promote.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
Do that. Talking to you about cold movies is probably like talking to Big Pussy about Sopranos. Like, it's like, okay, everyone's talking to me about Sopranos.
You know, it's interesting. So I used to have a podcast, like a music podcast that Brian was on many times. Right. I love rock and roll. But he used to manage a rock club. So when I was able to interview him, we barely even talked Sopranos. Like, we talked rock music and stories.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are relieved. Sometimes they're like, okay, not another. Oh, when did you find out that you were being killed off?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That, which is a question I would ask him. I'd be a hack and be like, I'm such a big Sopranos fan. There's a documentary coming out, or it's just started being, I don't know. I think it's like a David Chase.
On HBO.
I think there's a few episodes out now.
It'll be funny enough because he'd be like, so when did you start smoking weed? The day I find out I was being killed on Sopranos.
Are you a big weed smoker?
Like I said in the text, I smoke like 2 or 3 times. It all depends if I'm in a safe space, that kind of thing. Plus, weed from the 90s and weed today is literally like, the old school bicycle with the giant wheel going to an F1 fucking racer when it comes to how the weed has evolved.
Do you remember when everyone was like, man, when it gets legalized, weed is going to suck? Remember when everyone thought that for a long time? They were like, once they get a hold of it, it's going to be this really doled out, stupid shit. And it's going to, it couldn't be more false.
Just the opposite.
Done with weed.
You're like, you smoke weed, you're going to be able. Do you want the illusions to be circus clowns? Do you want it? Right. Do you want the weed that's going to make you think you're a sex machine? What kind of weed do you want? Like, you go in and it's like an appointment for an eye doctor all of a sudden, where it's like, well, we have these glasses.
Well, that's the thing, is the variety.
I remember the very first time I went to a dispensary was in Colorado. It was in Colorado when they first legalized it out there. And I went into it was my first time in a dispensary. I had no idea what to expect. I was so excited. And there was like a girl that was half my age working the counter. She looked like she was 17 or something. And she was like, we have sativa, we have indica, we have hybrid. It can be this. And she was like, what do you want? What do you need? And she was so in my face about it. And I was just like, I need a minute is what I need.
Yeah.
I've been dreaming about this day my whole life.
You can just walk in.
You're just a little too in my face. Like, I just need a second to soak all of this in.
Right. And also, can you tell me what all those things, like, tell me the difference between sativa and
I still don't know. Like, people will call me up. Hey, what? I'm like, I just know that I feel better when I'm high, and that's that's as much research as I've done.
There's always been a difference in the strains, but it was really a gamble back in the day when you went from a dealer. So, like, you didn't have the choice. You didn't understand the difference. If somebody, you might have had a preference of one to the other, but it was very general terms. It was just like sativa. I like that. Like, it wasn't like there's all these smaller strains now that we're aware of. Like, there were. But now we're like aware of them. And it's like, like someone could really walk you through those things. And on the other hand, on the other side of it, like, weed has gotten so much more complex and stronger. And then things like mushrooms This is
Right.
something you're familiar with.
Yeah.
People use microdose mushrooms. I never saw that shit coming where it goes the other way, where you do less of it. Because I guess as a kid growing up, it was like maximum high. What's the
How wasted can I get for the least amount of money?
I would have never thought that mushrooms would be a thing that you could microdose. Well, I didn't know what microdosing was back then, but that you could microdose. Because to me, mushrooms are just like throw a bunch of the hamburger. Like that was my experience with that. It's like throw a bunch of the hamburger and fucking trip balls. Like that. Like it was just like, oh, too. Is that too many? Am I going to have too many right now?
Now you could just eat like a little chocolate square.
Yeah. Right. The edibles. Now it's built into so many different things.
But it's a controlled amount, like, how, like, it'll say like eat 1 square for this, 2 for if you want to lose your mind, eat the whole bar.
Yeah.
But you eat 1 square and it doesn't get all trippy. Like it's just kind of like you just sort of feel euphoric. Like you just laugh your ass off for a few hours and it's like, oh, I think I actually like this better than watching the walls breathe.
Yeah. Well, like I'm still not, because I've not microdosed mushrooms. My barber yesterday was telling me how he does that as he's cutting my hair. He's like, oh yeah, I microdosed this morning. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. What are you about to do to my head? Because in my head, and I know you've talked to me about it, but like it just, to me, mushrooms is extreme because I only know it in that extreme form. Yeah. So, like, I know with weed, it's a thing you could, as I've seen that, you could experience it in larger, small quantities, especially when you're smoking. You could just keep on or stop smoking.
Yep.
Edibles with weed have fucked me up too. Like, I like in a way that I didn't see it coming. Like, I remember getting edibles from someone. I mean, someone just like made them and they sold them at this like market. And my wife and I took these like little circular gummies. And I had the wildest fucking horrible night. Like I had this thing where like I had 2 simultaneously tracks of thought where like I was like, I'm fucked up. I'm like hallucinating. And the other track of thought was like, you're fucked. Like there was another track of thought that was like more aware. And there was one that was freaking out. It was like I had 2 voices in my head. It was the weirdest sensation I'd ever had. And there was like an almost like a conversation between the 2 happening in my head where one was like, holy shit, I think I just saw the fucking couch move. And the other one was like, no, you're just high, like, and it was like rationalizing with each other. And then I like threw up that night. It was really fucking bizarre. And my wife felt nothing. Same thing. She had the same thing. I was dumb enough to do it again. And I was like, yeah, let's try it. Because she basically called me a pussy. And she was like, come on, there's nothing. And she's like, so we tried it again. And I had no reaction. And she had a massive, horrible reaction. Because when people are making it, the distribution.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like that scene in Casino where he opens up the blueberry muffins and like, look at this. Look at it. I have four blueberries. You have 17 blueberries.
Yeah.
And he goes back to the cook and he's like, listen, you count every blueberry for every muffin.
Yeah, it's like when you go to Chipotle and all the rice is on one side of the burrito.
Right? Well, you know what? If you get the edible, this is just a little pro tip. If you get the edibles from a dispensary, it is the same dosage in every edible, right. And it's usually not a great amount. It's usually like a 10 milligram gummy, which
it's meant to control.
It's give you a little bit of a buzz.
Yeah.
When you get into like the homemade edibles, or like there's like a CBD place by me that doesn't sell weed unless the secret handshake.
Yeah.
And they'll give you edibles sometimes, and it'll say like this bag is 500 milligrams, but it hasn't been regulated. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, so there's 20 pieces, 500 milligrams. Each one of them should be however many. But what it doesn't tell you is like, yeah, there might be 500 milligrams in that bag, but they're not evenly dispersed. You don't know. So it sort of becomes, like you said, it's a little bit like edible roulette. And sometimes you can take one and feel nothing. And then I've also had times where I took one edible and I was fucked up for like 8 hours. Yeah. Where you're like, when is this going to end? I hate edible roulette.
Yeah. And then, you make the mistake. Many people make the mistake of just going with more.
Yeah.
I did that with like
cookies. Like if you take an edible and it doesn't work, give it a long time before you.
Yeah. I made the mistake with like homemade cookies once, and it was Yeah, I was like, it was just my first time ever doing edibles. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And I was like in the cookie, like chocolate chip cookies that our friend made. I was like, this is fucking stuff. This is not good. I taste the weed. Like this cookie tastes like shit and I'm not high. It's like I taste the weed in the cookie and I'm not high. So I went and had another one. And then my fucking face was in a puddle on the floor. Like just out of I remember my dog, who was alive at the time, we didn't know where my dog was. And I remember we had fried chicken that night. And all of a sudden, me and my wife both like, where's the dog? He's eating the chicken bones. And my dog was on the couch. We just didn't see him. Yeah. Like that was the level of like, oh, and then it hit. I was like, oh, I'm not going to be okay for hours, am I?
See, now today, you'd be worried that your neighbors ate your dog.
Right. They're eating our dogs. They're eating our cats.
Too funny.
This will go on, much later than that debate happened. This will be out in a few weeks. But was there a funnier moment ever than they're eating our dogs, they're eating our cats? Just as a line by itself. Forget what political affiliations you are.
Talk about thinking like
they're eating our cats is one of the best.
Talk about thinking you were on an edible at that point.
I can't stop saying it. I can't watch a person walk a dog and I'm like, they're eating our dogs, they're eating our cats. I love saying it.
I said, it's so. I didn't see any. I was at a concert the night of the debate. We were at Jane's.
I watched something far more entertaining.
Yeah, we were at Jane's Addiction, which is my favorite band from the 90s. Wow. But it was like it was a hell gig for them. It was maybe the worst. It was Perry Farrell was not well. And it was a train wreck to the point where my friend turned to me about 3 or 4 songs and he's like, they should just put the debates up on the screen at this point.
Oh, shit.
We started getting texts. Me and my wife started getting texts coming through from different friends. Like, are you watching these debates? They're going to eat your dogs. And when we were like, what the fuck?
What are you talking about?
What is going on?
Like, because if somebody said that, you'd be like, there's no way that one of the presidential candidates just said they're eating our dogs and our cats.
Well, so I couldn't stop laughing because I was picturing like, I think he actually said like, if Harris wins, they're going to eat your dogs. And then I just,
he said it's happening already, but it's going to happen more.
Right. Like if she wins. And then I couldn't stop laughing because I was picturing cats like unionizing and figuring out how to vote. Like now's our chance.
Little MAGA cats.
We can win this shit once and for all.
Little red hats on them.
No, but he did. It's funny you should say that. That campaign put out an AI generated cat with an AR and the hat with a whole group of other similar looking cats.
Well, Trump's camp.
Yeah. Put that out. And I was just like, wow, this shit's gotten cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah, but not at least it's funny. Like I can actually appreciate that move, like doing the AI thing and making a joke out of it.
But you would think if
at that point is making a joke out of it.
If you thought that the running mates kind of ploy to childless cat ladies landed like a fucking thud, you'd stay away from mentioning cats ever again, or couches for that matter.
Yeah. No couches. And then, yeah. I mean, it was wild. It was a wild fucking debate. Like it was
definitely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
It was bonkers, and it was entertaining at times. Scary. It's all scary because these are our presidential candidates. But it was entertaining in a way. It was like a roller coaster. Like, we had just saw the one with him and Biden like was like, like he was like petting the podium because he thought it was a poodle. And then like this happened, and this was it was also this like, oh, this is serious now. Cause that was like a play date that didn't matter anymore. And it was silly.
But it's also such a ridiculous thing that if this was an SNL skit pitched,
right,
Lauren would be like, "Oh, you out of your mind? There's
no one's going to believe that he would say,
right,
that joke's too extreme,
right?
No one's going to believe. It's not funny because it's too fantastic."
But I like that people are blaming the moderators. Like, wait, did ABC make him scream out weird shit?
No,
like,
the reason why they're blaming the moderators.
No, I know why.
Have you seen the clips?
because they fact checked him a few times.
Right.
But
they're like, but they didn't fact check her. Here are the two funniest parts to me. They didn't fact check her. It's like, well, she didn't say shit like that. Whether someone can be fact checked or not, I'm not saying that you couldn't fact check things she was saying, but she didn't. I mean, you know, because there was like the abortion thing, it was like, oh, they're killing babies after they're born and all this shit, you know, so that kind of thing. So they were, so then the moderator in a very cold, the female moderator in a very cold way, would just looked right at him and like before she moved to Harris went, there is not a state in existence that allows you to kill a baby after they're born. Anyway, Harris, and then like she said it so cold and then moved on. And I think, you know, people in his camp or supporters of his, I should say, are like, what the fuck, you know? But it's like, but I've heard people thought her pearl earrings were a fucking earpiece where she was being fed the lines. They're like, she got all the questions ahead of time. By the way, they both get the questions ahead of time. It's a debate. It's not maybe not in the exact wording, but like, you know, all the topics that are going to come up in a debate. It's not
literally it was like economy, immigration,
all the champagne staples,
abortion.
Yeah,
you know, every little thing that you talk about. It was the 5 topics that they talk about all the time, right. And so like she got the questions ahead of time. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah. Look, just like the other side had to accept that the Biden, you know, what Biden did was like, oof, that's rough during the first.
Well, he shit the bed. Come on, he might have literally.
No, he shit the bed that like he shit his pants there. He was still shitting a bed that he's in now, but
at least
they had to accept that.
They accepted it, and then they went, listen, we need to adjust. This is not good for you. It's not good.
That was
the
final straw. That was, I think, when they were like, all right, we gotta this guy. I mean, it was embarrassing for the left, just like this is embarrassing for the right.
Right.
There's no way around it. That was Jordan dunking on a child. That's what it felt like. You know what I mean? And same way in the first debate, it was completely one-sided, you know? This will be the part of the show that everyone's like, he's pieces of shit, you know?
Yes. Completely just leave this completely out of it. It doesn't make a difference to anybody. If nobody's made up their mind at this point at who's they're voting for, like, and I say this all the time. When like people are like, so who are you voting for? I'm like, does it make a difference? Does me telling you what I'm going to vote going to make you go?
Yeah, it does because they want to rage at you.
The clerk guy makes a wise point. Like that's not. It's never going to change anything.
Oh, fucking Library of Congress over here telling me who to vote for.
You're a deep stater. You're a deep
government. Mr. Government. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Brian, thank you so much for coming on. You did, by the way, a lot longer with us than we thought we were going to have you on. So thank you for saying.
Oh, you sound like my prom date.
Yeah, you lasted so long. And I'm so satisfied with it. So this is so good. Really, thank you so much for coming on. It's a bit too much podcast.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
On all the socials.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. This is a bit too much.